We gather for the Kavod HaAcharon, a loving farewell to Rav Eliyahu ben Yosef Moshe, Rabbi Eli Fishman. We gather with his family, his beloved Eshes Chayil for over 60 years, Eileen Rebbitzin, children, Joseph, Yechiel, Kiva, Rebecca. We gather with grandchildren, as well as the family, beginning with, by age order, Sherry and their children, with Rabbi Yechiel, Talia and Meshulam, Ariel and Chaya, and Daniel, and great-grandchildren of theirs, Bracha, Aliza, and Aaron, Akiva and Sharon, and their children, Jonah, Jesse, and Joel, Rebecca, her children, Lauren, Josh, and Amanda, and Joseph, Rabbi Yossi. Together, this extraordinary man left an extraordinary legacy. The Kos Shel Eliyahu overflowed. Together with us today, we're honored to have many Rabbonim. We'll ask to begin this afternoon for Tehillim, call upon Rabbi Shmuel Golden of Englewood to please come forward.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagur b'olecha mi yishkon b'har kodshecha. Holech tamim ufoel tzedek v'dover emes bilvavo. Lo ragal al l'shono lo asa l'reyehu ra'a v'cherpa lo nasal krovo. Nivzeh be'einav nimas ves yirei Adonai yichabed. Nishba l'hora v'lo yomir. Kaspo lo nasan beneshech v'shochad al maki lo lakach, osei ele lo yimot liolam.
Rabbi Yaakov Trump of the Young Israel of Lawrence Cedarhurst.
Shira Malois, Elecha nosasias einai hayashvi v'ashamayim. Hinei cheinei avodim el yad Adonaihem, keinei shivcho el yad gvirta. Kein einenu el Adonai Eloheinu ad shechonenu. Chonenu Adonai chonenu, ki rav savanu vuz. Rabas savalo nafshenu. Halag hashananim, habuz ligei yonim.
I'd like to also kavod to very close family friend, instrumental in important work, Rabbi Yerucham Shane, honor us with the Kapitel Tehillim.
Shir amalos asher koirei Adonai holech b'drachav. Yigir kapecha kisochel. Ashrecha v'tov lach. Eshtecha kigefen pariyo b'yakase b'secha. Banecha kishesu lezesim saviv l'shulchanecha. Hine chen yivarach gava. Yirei Adonai, Yivarach Adonai b'tzion, Urei b'tuv Yerushalayim. Kol yimei chayecha. Urei banim levanecha shalom Yisrael.
Also want to recognize Rabbi Zev Friedman, Rambam, Rabbi Dale Polikoff, the Great Neck Synagogue, Rabbi Avi Miller of Congregation Beth Shalom, Rabbi Shmuel Ismach of Great Neck. We're going to hear today from the generations, beginning with the grandchildren, Amanda, Josh, and Lauren, to say words in tribute and in memory of Rav Fishman.
My most special memory with my Zaidi came this Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Because he was not able to walk to shul, we made a minyan for him in our home in Englewood. We were shocked by how many people from our community came to daven with us and honor our Zaidi. Every one of my parents' friends who have ever met him loves and respects him deeply. Rosh Hashanah was so incredibly beautiful that Zaidi asked to do it again for Yom Kippur. Word spread about our incredible minyan, and so many more people from the community came. Even though he was very weak, he came to davening the entire time. As I looked across the room at my Zaidi, I was inspired. I could see him trying to stand at every prayer, even though everyone around him told him to sit, and could hear his voice singing loudly. My sister described it as an out-of-body experience, and my tefillah have never been more meaningful. This was very special because we always told him that we loved him, but here we got to do something for him that showed him what he means to us. He was the center of our whole family, and he could look around the room and see all of his children hugging and grandchildren running around and playing. It was incredible that Zaidi Eli spent the last Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur surrounded by his amazing family that he built and loved so much.
My Zaidi set the best example any grandchild could ever ask for. He was kind, funny, and always had a smile that would light up the room. Zaidi always found joy in everything, no matter the situation. I vividly remember receiving a phone call from Zaidi during my Poland trip with school last May. He asked me where I was, and I told him I was in Auschwitz, to which he responded, "I was there too." He was always willing and happy to talk and tell stories about both the darkest and happiest moments of his life, and with every story I became more enamored of him. Zaidi was always thinking about everyone else, even last week asking every few minutes if I had enough to eat or drink. One night a few weeks ago when I visited him with my mom, he asked who was home taking care of Willie, my dog, while we were gone. He was never worried about himself, but always around those around him. I am blessed to have been able to learn from my Zaidi for 18 years and will always cherish my memories of him.
When I close my eyes and picture my Zaidi, I immediately see his glowing smile and can hear his beautiful deep voice singing my Yiddish Mama and other songs that his mother sang to him as a child. I hear his corny jokes and puns, offering a knedel for the madel and explaining why he didn't teach his kids to play sports, because he wasn't able to join the Auschwitz softball team. I think of the things he loved most in this world: laying on the beach, hot chicken soup, the rabbis who he utterly adored and could talk about for days, his book, and most importantly, his family. In the last weeks of his life, that huge smile never faded. When I would walk into the room, he could barely lift his head up, but when his gaze landed on me, his eyes opened wide and his face immediately lit up, beaming with exuberance, thrilled to see me, and making me feel like the most special girl in the world. My Zadie was always able to experience that deep sense of pure joy in the face of some of the most horrific types of pain. Turn the loss of his entire family and world as he knew it into something positive, a passion for Torah, love for his children, and dedication to inspiring and connecting with every individual he encountered, including the aides who cared for him, and even my housekeeper's husband who would come by just to visit him. Just 2 weeks ago, I was lucky enough to spend the entire Shabbat with my family, just laying around Zadie for hours as we listened intently to his astonishingly detailed recollections of his childhood and life experiences. His mind was sharp, and his memory impeccable every day of his life, giving us explanations by reciting long passages of Tanakh just last week. I think he might actually have remembered every single person he ever met in his life. I grew up listening to his stories, and they have become essential to my being. Any name or place that someone mentioned would quickly spiral into a flowing stream of memories and stories. And once he started, he could not be stopped. Not until he had shared every detail of the account, engaging everyone around him and generating an endless slew of questions, whether we were hearing it for the first time or the 100th time. I know I will always remember the small memories, like the small stories, like the details for the first time he tasted watermelon while in Berlin after the war, that he was certain must have been from Gan Eden, as well as the big ones, like how immediately after liberation of Dachau, still in his camp uniform, he went to learn Torah with the chief rabbi of Germany. Some people choose to forget, to put the most excruciating memories of the past behind them. But my Zadie Eli dedicated his life to making sure that we always remember, by sharing with us and with the world his loss and his pain, and most importantly, the small joys he was nevertheless able to find from amongst the darkness. It was this joy that enabled him to dedicate his whole self to spreading Torah and working to rebuild the Jewish community. For someone who witnessed so much death, Zadie Eli was simply so full of life. My Zadie Eli was uniquely adored and respected beyond what words can describe. His children were only deeply honored to stay up with him all night, caring for him, scratching his back and massaging his feet. Mommy, you taught me what kibbud av va'em truly means. I could see it by the way you just looked at Zadie, who you called the cutest man in the world, and who you did not want to leave his side for even a brief moment. You worshipped him and returned the love and respect that he gave to you your whole life. I cannot speak about Zadie without thanking my Uncle Yossi. You are a hero to this family and a true tzaddik, and each and every one of us will be forever grateful for the way you cared for him. My Zadie Eli was the ultimate personification of strength, resilience, and sheer joy. I see these characteristics in my mother and my uncles, and I will strive to embody them every day of my life. His memory will forever live on in his stories, which are written down in his book, but also etched in all of our minds and hearts. And I know we will always continue to remember them, share them, and learn from them.
Grandsons, Ariel, Danielle.
When I think about the life of my grandfather, the following chazal comes to mind. The Gemara tells us in Masechtas Sanhedrin, Sheker achein, v'hevel hayofi, isha yiras Hashem hitasala. It's really a pasuk. The Gemara Darshan expounds this verse. It says, Sheker achein, false is grace. Zeru darash al Moshe v'Yeshua. This is the generation of Moshe and Yeshua, the generation of Kabbalah Satira. The Hevel HaYofi, and vanity is beauty. Zui darash al Chizkiah. This is the door. This is the generation of Chizkiah Melech. And both these generations are so much Torah and Yerushalayim, but says Chazal, it was these generations that were false and vanity. But you know what Isha Yiras Hashem Hitasal is? Zui Darash Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. This is the generation of Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. Because on Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai it said, Shayayu shisha talmidim, miskasin betalas echad, v'oiskim b'Torah. There were 6 students that would cover themselves with one garment, and they'd be Isaac in Torah. They would learn. They're Rabbi Shalom's words. And says the Maharsha, it was this door, and all doors that were so great, but it was this door that relative to the other doors and other generations, that it had the definition of Isha years, the Shami Tisalau, because they learned Torah mitechat chak. They learned Torah with pain. It was my grandfather. And under the Nazi occupation, he learned with Rosh Hashiva, with Amelis. When his Rosh Hashiva was ripped away from him, he didn't forsake those words of Torah. He saw the vicious actions of the Nazis, the murder of his grandparents. He experienced the death of thousands around him. His father, his mother, his brother, his sister, his yeshiva, his community all perished. But he survived. And you know what he did after he survived? He learned Torah with pain. He was mekabel and al Torah she'en ketigumasa v'tzurasa. He learned Torah under Rav Shnag with Shishach Talmidim under one talis, with not even a garment to his name, not a penny, no parnasa, nothing. Who could reach such a madrega of Kabbalah Sol Torah? But it was not just that. He preached this Torah to so many others. And when he came to America, he taught Smicha students in Yeshiva University. He was a Rav in Connecticut and in Field, New Jersey. And he preached those words, that the Rebbeinu Shem is a Kel Rachem Nechanan, that the Rebbeinu Shem is a mercy king. He's an Erech Apayim. He's a Rav Chesed Liames. He's slow to anger, and he does kindness. It was my Bubby and Sadie who together built a community in Freer, New Jersey, the Kaval Tiferes. And there are children in that community that today are Bitzei Torah from a Yidden, no matter if they were observant or not, when they were children. It was my grandparents who gave them such an inspiration and such a passion for life. Because that was Edie and that was Bubby. I was collecting tzedakah on behalf of a project that one of the members of my family started. And I called up a balabas from Lakewood, New Jersey, who I never even met before. And I told him about the project. And he says, I'll think about giving a donation. I get an email the next day with a donation for $1,800 with an explanation. And he writes, I was a boy from Howell, New Jersey. And I remember what your grandparents had done for the Freehold community. Who your grandfather was. That was baby, that was Bubby and Zadie. But if you pay attention to what I wrote, you'll notice that Howell is not Freehold. Howell was not even in walking distance of Friel, New Jersey. So with his boy, how could he be inspired if he didn't even hear those drashas on Shabbos? And you know what the answer is? Because it didn't matter. By Zadie, if you were a survivor, then you could inspire, no matter where you are. And no matter what type of boy you are, whether you'd have to drive to shul on Shabbos, you could be inspired. I said, tired. By Hanukkah time, I was just here with Zadie. And Becky was there, and Yossi, and my father. And they're talking about politics, about Donald Trump. And Zadie wasn't saying a word. And he stops the conversation, and the only words that there's about were stop Daniel saying Dvar Torah. This was his love. Because he told me every week he would look forward to the conversation, the Friday Dvar Torah. Or just to say hello. Your grandson Daniel's calling on the phone. He's there again. He says, oh, Daniel. That was Zadie. The opposite tire. But he also had a love for his friend. It's my grandfather, Zadie, who's recorded to be the only American rabbi participant of a bar mitzvah ceremony for 68 orphans of IDF soldiers in Eretz Yisrael. Because he went there because he loved to share in the pain of another. Because he too was an orphan and he could feel their pain. It was Zadie who in the war risked his life to go save Hungarian women that were in Auschwitz, to give them food, to rescue them. He was Meiser Nefesh for another. And it was Zadie who saved the two Stein brothers by getting them jobs with the Commandant during the war, by taking them out of Auschwitz and giving them hope to survive. And through that, it was Zadie who was also able to survive. Because it was those two Stein brothers that picked him up after he had fallen on the death marches. I to quote you that chazal of the door of the generation of Yehuda Bar Ilai. Shisha Talmidim Miskasin B'Talas Echad V'Yiskim B'Torah. 6 students who together could cover themselves with one talis and learn Torah. And we said the Marshas Pshat. It teaches us the greatness of a person who is Isik B'Torah B'Tekatchak, with pain. But there's another big limud. And as Reb Chaim Shulevitz says, the obvious question: it's impossible for 6 students to cover themselves with one talis. And so explained Reb Chaim Shulevitz, this chazal, that it's only true that it's impossible for 6 students to cover themselves with one talis if each one pulls the talis to himself. But if each one gives the talis to another, then 6 Talmidim could cover themselves with one talis. It was like Zadie who gave his garment to his friends, to Klal Yisrael, to his community, to his children, and to his grandchildren. is now his descendants, after his patira. Akiva, Yossi, Becky, and my father, and all the grandchildren will have to take over this responsibility to teach, to love, and to grow, to give to another. It must be Makar Tov to each of the doctors, Dr. Avita and Dr. Greenspan, to all the doctors that took care of my Zaidi, to Yossi, Becky, my father, and Akiva, for their unbelievable dedication, and Prat Yossi for holding them in his house, for taking care of him. As my grandfather told me, that my whole life is Yossi, is due to him. He loved his children. And I must thank them for taking care of him to his last days. Bila hamavas lenetzach v'shani b'mutam milal kopanim. Amen.
Dearest Alinka, you must remain here. The Master of the Universe will help. That in the merit of the Avos and your ancestors, you will remain alive to be remembrance of your entire family. Alinka, dearest, this you must remember always. Always. These are the words that my great-grandmother, Ruda Rivka, shared with my grandfather, Rabbi Eli Fishman, Zicher Tzadik Ukadosh L'Bracha, before they were separated. And it's a lesson that remains with me to this very day. My grandfather, as you all know, wrote this book on the Holocaust and his story. But it wasn't just his story, it was the story of many others. And he would always relate over the famous Gemara, the famous passage in the Talmud, in Voda Zarah, that says that Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan, who taught Torah in public, the Romans, they wrapped him up in the Torah scroll, and they burnt him alive. And his students asked him, Rabbi, what do you see? And he said, the scroll is burning, but the letters, the osios of the Torah, are going to Shemayim, they're going to heaven. My grandfather, with all of his Torah, with his family, and with his actions, he brought those letters back down to earth. Teaching and bringing light back into this world. Regarding what my elder Bubby Zaidi's mother said, Ruda Rivka, Alav Shalom, I can surely say about Zaidi that with your family, your Torah, and your life, regarding that fact that you are remembrance, you were then, you are now, and you always will be. People call my grandfather a pure and holy survivor, but I also call him a liver, because he lived and he never gave up. Not even till the end. The Torah says, your God is a merciful God. Lo yarpecha v'lo yashchisecha. He will not fully destroy you. V'lo yishkach es bris avosecha asher nishba alahem. And he will not forget the covenant, the promise that he made to them. The Jewish people may face destruction, but not full destruction. We will never be destroyed. when the time comes in the future, and now that Zadie's going to the next world, and that all the holy and the righteous will be redeemed in the time to come, Tchias HaMesim, the redemption of the dead. And my grandfather is buried in the land that he loved in Israel his whole life. I know that he will be reunited with his heritage everlasting. And my great-grandmother used to tell my grandfather all the time, people talk about yichus, people talk about lineage, I come from such and such a family. She said, that's not even the most important thing. The most important thing is yichus atzmo. It's the legacy you make for yourself. And he left a legacy, my grandfather, well beyond the people in this room, that continues to reverberate around the world and will do so for generations to come. I want to share two short stories that I think reflect a lot of what he did in this world. Anyone who goes to the crematorias and the barracks of Auschwitz and Birkenau and all these camps, my grandfather was going to be a builder there to help out, and they had found that the heat from the women's barracks, in the barracks they had these metal ovens, and after the heat would go, people wouldn't have heat. So he helped devise a method to enclose the metal ovens with brick, because he was a bricklayer at the time, helping out. That's what he did to survive. And he helped keep them warm, the women. He provided heat for their lives, but warmth for the soul of a new generation. Another story happened on Pesach, which was always when I had the most fondest memories of my Zadie. At the head of the table in his white robe. And I think it was a couple of years before the end of the war, a year before the end of the war, 1943, 44. And they wanted to sneak matzah into the camps. Can you imagine? Your life is on the line, and you care about a piece of grain. And he was working with the railway group outside of the camp, and they had snuck grain in so they could keep the mitzvah of eating matzah on Passover, on Pesach. And the rabbi at the time, I think it was from the rabbi of Warsaw, Rabbi Shapiro, said, after all the people helped to make this happen, that this act of sacrifice, this act of sacrifice will earn us a place in heaven. A Geula Shlema, a complete redemption. Well, my grandfather spent the end of his life writing memoirs and lessons, and ultimately published his book, which documents his life and the life of others who were involved in his story. He also wrote a different kind of book, a different kind of sefer. In fact, many of them, many svarim, many books. But those books are not written in ink. No. That in the lives of those he touched, for Torah is a Torah's Chaim. It's a Torah of life. His thirst for Torah was unparalleled. After the war, when many people could have despaired, he decided, as was mentioned, to learn Torah with his rabbi, Rabbi Schneig, who became the chief rabbi of Germany after the war zone, in prison garb on his back. Can you imagine to learn Torah while you have physically still attached to the horrors you have seen. That picture remains with me to this day, and I will never forget it. He helped with Rabbi Schneg, who was very involved in the many questions that people had after the war, writing tshuva, writing letters back and forth with the most complicated and terrible questions people had to face. And I know that Shimush Chachamim, helping and providing help to our sages and our Torah teachers, is one of the greatest values that one can do. There's a famous story of the Satmar Rebbe, that one person came over to him and asked him, "Rebbe, if you go away, who will we bring the kvittel? Who will we bring the letters for brachas, for blessing?" And he said, "That's very easy. Just go to anybody who has a number on their arm that wraps tefillin to this day. And there you'll find your blessing." Zaidi not only wrapped tefillin, but dedicated his entire life to teaching Torah to people. People that didn't know Torah, people that didn't come in contact with Torah. And he could definitely give a bracha. But one cannot do it alone. My Zaidi had an amazing partner, my Bubby Eileen, who I can't even put into words how amazing she is. He met her reading the Mor Nevuchim at an educational conference, and he said, "This is the girl for me." And his devoted children, Uncle Yossi, Aunt Becky, Uncle Akiva, and my father, who thirsted for his wisdom, and I'm sure will always do so. I was there at the end, and I saw something I have never seen in my life. I saw two of his children on his left, two of his children on his right, and I just had this image in my mind of the famous story from Yechezkel, where they're talking about the glory of Hashem, however you understand that story, and the chariots are there. The kavod that they have given to their father is a kavod, an honor that reminds me of the throne of glory of Hashem. That was the kibbut of aim they had, and I really want to thank Yossi also, who put in so much time, putting everything above them. You know, lives are told by what happens next. My Zaidi's children have dedicated their lives to helping others, to learning Torah, and to continuing this legacy. There's a phrase, a verse in Shir HaShirim that says, Mayim rabim lo yuchlu lechavos es ha'ava, that mighty waters cannot extinguish the love. It's talking about Israel and the Rabboni Shalom, the people of Israel and the Rabboni Shalom and God. But let me tell you something about my father, my grandfather. He loved us so much, nothing could stop it. And we loved him back. Mayim rabim lo yuchlu lechavos es ha'ava, the tears that we have today will never be extinguished. I want to share with you one story that happened when we were very young. We decided to go rafting. I think it was the Delaware River. And on that raft, my father was there, my grandfather, and we had missed the turnoff to get where you're supposed to go. And that doesn't always sound good, because where are you going to go next? And who decided to help us at that moment? We're all scrambling, terrified. The Holocaust survivor, Rabbi Eli Fishman, jumps out of the raft to save his grandchildren, even in his elder years, and his family, because that's just who he was, a survivor and a fighter. There's an important concept to remember. Chazal say, "Chut hamishlosh lo yinatek," that the threefold connection cannot be broken. And I have been zochet to see my grandfather, see my own son, the fourth generation, who he always spoke about as similar to the famous story of Yosef, that when Yosef was in Mitzrayim, he got to see his great-grandchild, the son of Micha, raised on his Birka Yosef, by Yosef. And he was zochet to see not only his spiritual legacy live on, but even his family's. As the prophet Yeshayahu says, Umacha Hashem Elokim Dima, may al kol panim, may God wipe away the tears from every face. And Mirza Hashem, we will see Mashiach soon, and we'll be reunited with you, Zaidi, while you're in Shemayim. Hashem.
By Yossi Fishman, Bechor.
The prophet Elisha sees his Rabbi Eliyahu Hanavi, Vayal Eliyahu Baseora Hashamayma, that Elijah the prophet was taken up in a fiery chariot. Umitzarik, and he screams out, Avi, Avi, Rechav Yisrael Porashav, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. And then he takes his garments and he tears them. And he picks up Vayorem es Aderes Eliyahu. He picks up the mantle of Eliyahu Hanavi. And he follows in his footsteps to be a Navi B'Yisrael. My beloved father, Rabbi Eliyahu and Rabbi Yosef Moshe Fishman, Zeichet Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Bracha, many times spoke of this biblical metaphor that we, the surviving generation of Jews, will have to pick up the Aderes Eliyahu, the mantle of Eliyahu, and carry it forward. In this case, Avi, my dear beloved father, you are our Eliyahu, and it is to us to pick up your mantle and to carry it forward. The double portion that Elisha asked for, Pishnayim Baruchacha. Everyone who has spoken so far made evident the kind of inspiration that a mensch like my father could inspire. Not by fiery oratory, but by sweetness, by goodness. Such an ohev es abriya, such a lover of humanity, from a person who suffered so much at the hands of others. I once learned a metaphor about faith after the Holocaust, which is the name of my father's sefer, recently published. There's Eov, the man who suffered, Job in the Tanakh, Eov, and there's the brother of Eov. What Eov went through, what the generation of Eov went through in the Shoah, we, the generation born in America, in a privileged life, this is the brother of Eov. So for us to say we have faith after a Shoah, there are many who say, I can't have faith. Many brothers of Eov can't have faith. So the Rabbi, Eliezer Berkovitz in this case, wrote, there's no similarity. For the brother of Eov to say, I lost my faith because of the Holocaust, while sitting comfortably in New York or Los Angeles, this is how we put, this is a chilul, this is a desecration of the loss of faith of those Jews who lost their faith because it was crushed out of them by the terrible suffering. But this is not what I want to focus on. It's the other part. For someone to say, I have faith in emunah and bitachon, even though there was a Holocaust, and even though there was a Churban, and even though there was suffering for the Jewish people, as the brother of Eov, this emunah pales into almost insignificance. When one contemplates what it means to go through a Shoah and to come out from there with emunah b'tachon, and in a hospital near Munich, Germany, near Dachau, hearing there's going to be a shiur from a Rosh Yeshiva who survived the war, a famous Rosh Yeshiva from Kovno, to run there. These boys ran there to sit there in garments from the concentration camp in Kepelach. They didn't have a yarmulke. It was a keppel from a German soldier. And you can see this photograph in the poster outside in the lobby, which was a beautiful gift to my father. And he's recently honored at the Adelphia Yeshiva dinner from a Rabbi Rucham Shein, who is here today, who appreciated what my father did in helping to establish that yeshiva when he was the Rav in New Jersey. The significance of that kind of a photograph, of what it depicts, has to be dwelled upon and contemplated. So, as a young boy growing up, learning about the history of our people and what the previous generation went to, as a child of a survivor, we always knew that our father, with his Auschwitz tattoo on his arm, joyfully teaching Torah to Jewish people, to Jewish kinder, that's something very special. That rises above anything that we could even imagine. And as I learn more about what he went through, I all the more appreciate the godless. Eliyahu's name is spelled usually with a vav. There's 5 places in Tanakh where it's spelled missing the vav, and 5 corresponding places that the name of the patriarch Jacob is spelled including a vav. Normally it's not spelled with a vav. Yud Ayin Kuf Beis is the normal spelling. Yud Ayin Kuf Vav Beis. It's an unusual spelling. And the Chazal explained this by saying that Yaakov took the letter Vav from the name of Eliyahu, Erovoin Sheyavo V'Yigal Ezbonav, as a security of a promise that Eliyahu would come to one day redeem the Jewish people, the children of Yaakov. You heard a little bit of who my father was. We all know the Daf Hayomi, very popular. Many people participate, including my brother who gives a shir, including my nephew Daniel, who started Daf Yomi after the Siyam Hashas that he attended when he was in high school. Many, many people studied. Did you know that in the early days, after it was first established by Rabbi Shapiro, the Rosh Yeshiva of Chachmei Lublin in Poland, it was just beginning. It wasn't very widespread. My father was a boy during the second machzor, the second cycle. In 1938, there was a completion of the Shas held in Lublin that my father's Rav, the Rav of his shtetl, went to attend it because he was one of the foremost Talmidim of that yeshiva, of Chachmei Lublin. And in fact, Rav Meir Shapiro himself saw to it to secure for him the position of Rav of my grandfather's shtetl, of Rachav Anapol, not far from Lublin in Poland. And so my father relates to us, you know what I was doing when I was going to school as a little boy? I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning with the other little boys from Cheder. And we used to go to the house of our Rav. And in the house of the Rav of Rachav, Poland, there was a Daf Hayomi. Probably one of the only shtetls in Europe, because it was just beginning. But he was a Talmud of Meir Shapiro. And my father was his Talmud. At that tender age of 9 and 10 years old, they're studying a Daf Hayomi. That's when my father began. He had a chance, because the Rav loved him, to go to the great yeshiva in Lublin, Chachmei Lublin. He was pretty much too young for the yeshiva, but he got in because he had a little bit of help from the Rav of his town. And he was there for the year 1938. But he was never able to go back because of the war. And that's where it comes from. And after the Shoah, after emerging from a place like Auschwitz and a death march across the entire Germany till 20,000 people came out from a camp and several hundred survived to reach the destination, my father, one of them, to be liberated in Dachau and going to a hospital to recuperate, having nothing, as was said, no parnasa, no clothing, no nourishment, hearing about a shiur going to be given and running to sit down and learn. He didn't come last. If you look at that picture, my father is sitting right next to the Rosh Yeshiva. He was the first one there to secure himself a place at the table of Torah. And he learned with Rav Shneag for 5 years. And they tried to rebuild what Yiddishkeit they could. Many Jews were languishing in DP camps. It's a little known time of Jewish history. And these Rabbanim were trying to resurrect mishpachos, do marriages. My father had to travel all across Germany to try to get to the wedding of the first marriage from somebody who survived from his town, to be able to officiate as a Rav at his friend's marriage. My father, as a young rabbi, was called upon to make the Kel Mole at the first commemoration held at Dachau after the war. He had a beautiful voice. I'll never forget my father's story about how he came to know Chazanas, the cantorial ability, so well. They had a famous Chazan from Lodz who had survived, Chazan Raskin. Not well known, but he was a famous Chazan in Europe. And that 1 or 2 years after liberation, he came to Rav Shneag, and they had several thousand Jews who would come together there to daven on the Yom Noraim. I can't do it, I'm sick. So Rav Shneag thought for a minute, and he said, Eli, you're going to do it. So my father had never been a chazan. He was a yeshiva bacher. He said, but you have a nice voice. You'll learn. Raskin will teach you. And my father tells me that Chazan Raskin loved from the American supplies canned peaches. That's what he loved. And my father had another rabbi who became a good friend of his, who became the assistant chief rabbi of the IDF, Rav Shimon Rapeka. And Rav Rapeka was the mashgiach. So my father had a way to get the cans of peaches. He would bring to Chazan Raskin the peaches, and Chazan Raskin would teach him Nagina. And my father has a beautiful voice, a voice like an angel. I remember many times listening to his Rosh Chodesh benching, having tears come to my eyes with the ne'imus, the sweetness, the feeling that he put into it. A man such as my father, Harav Eliyahu Fishman, is a bridge between the generations. A bridge between our world after the Shoah and a glorious world of Torah that existed pre-war in places like Poland. A place that doesn't exist anymore. That we can only see its faint contours by looking at the personality of the people that represent it. When I had a chance to speak at the Adelphia Yeshiva dinner last year, and it came out that one of the main reasons my father felt it so important to try to help that yeshiva get up and running and raised funds to buy the property, to set it up in motion. A yeshiva where I studied, my brother Yechiel studied and we graduated, my brother Akiva studied and graduated. A yeshiva that's been producing Talmidim for many, many years since then, the 1970s, is because of what he saw in his home. His own father, whom I bear his name, Yosef Fishman, struggled to provide for the Jewish community. He was a good businessman, and he helped build a yeshiva ketana in the town of Rachav together with the Rav who came from Chachmei Lublin, Rav Finsterbush. And this is what my father saw as a young boy. My father went to that mechina before he went on to the yeshiva in Lublin. And not too long ago, my father actually met another Yid who had survived the war, who attended that yeshiva high school. It was not secular studies, it was like a yeshiva ketana. And that's what he saw, that his parents were Moisei Nefesh to build a Torah institution. And so he saw an opportunity to do the same. That was significant to him. That made him just go and do. And so I said to the boys that were gathered at the dinner, you know, the person who helped establish this yeshiva, he had an intention to rebuild something that was lost before the war. And therefore, when you learn your Torah, the Torah you learn is for you, but it's also at the same time, you're learning for all the Talmidim who perished, whose lives were cut short. It's a big significance. My father was not only a Torah teacher, he was a person who taught the Torah's Chaim, the Torah of life. I cannot even begin to tell you the kind of midos that my father had. He was I can't say he was a quiet person, but because he spoke out when it mattered to him. But on a lot of things, his demeanor was not forceful. Benachas nishmaim, he was gentle. there was a tremendous kind of humility about him. You get to know him, and you start to see something very big and very great. An unbelievable sense of humor, going from the corny all the way to the hysterical. But you know something? As many times as he told the same joke over again, that I remember when my nephew Daniel started going on shidduchim. He said, you know what you have to talk about on a date? There's three things. There's an old story about you talk about philosophy, family, romance. It's a famous rabbi story. So we all knew the punchline. You know, the boy goes on the date and he starts, what can I talk about? Family? Okay. You have a sister? No. He gets befuddled, doesn't know what to say, and he goes to the next question. And the answer is, well, philosophy, romance, philosophy. Okay. He asks a question and the answer is no again. And then the final question, if you had a sister, would she like Harry? You know, it was a funny joke the first time you heard it, maybe kind of cute. But every time my father told it, it got funnier and funnier. Because he enjoyed telling it. And it wasn't the only joke he had. There were a lot of them. So, but the sense of humor, every time I would say something to him, he'd come back with something that rhymes like it, that had a funniness to it. It's a small thing, but there's something that the mirth, the cuteness, is something that just touches you in your heart. This sweet, cute, beautiful man. His mind was so sharp. This helped him survive. A Nazi German called him Scharfer Yiddische Kopf. When my father figured out how to lay the floor in an airplane hangar in the camp of Butzen, that the guy, the Mahandes, the engineer, forgot to put down orders for, and he had a flu or some kind of sickness, and my father figured it out. Didn't go to engineering school. You have to make the cement on a little bit of an incline to funnel away all the jet fuel and airplane fuel and oil that's going to fall on the floor. There's a yeshiva bacher came up with that. The guy said to him, "You saved my neck also." When I learned in the Gemara such a thing as Ha'ne'elovim ve'enam oilvim, there's a thing called a person, a ne'elovim, who gets insulted or humiliated in some way, but never responds in kind, never embarrasses somebody else. I immediately thought, I know this person. I know this person. This is my father. He was a congregational rabbi. You know, it's not easy to be a congregational rabbi. It's like being a governor without the authority. Because you get elected, and everybody who votes has a right to say, I like you, I don't like you, you did this wrong, you did that. I can tell you how to be a rabbi better than you. And a rabbi doesn't have a covet in America like it was in Europe. You know, a rav was a rav in Europe, you know. A rav's like a judge in Europe. Here, the rabbi he's like, we have a shamus, we have a janitor, we have a rabbi, and we can't do it. Nobody understands. And so my father and the rabbis here, they know what I'm talking about. My father kept that as his career. That's what he wanted to reach people. You have to get through a lot of junk, a lot of people who abuse you. And they love him. And in personal life too. Sometimes a disagreement arises. I never in my life, I testify before you today, I never in my life heard my father use a bad word. Never. I never heard him say a lashon hara. I never heard him say a nivel peh. I never saw him act because he was completely b'shlita, completely in control of his personality and how he acted with people. He was a true Ben Torah. The things that his teachers instilled in him as a child in pre-war Poland, by his Rav and others that he learned with in Germany, there's no way to share even a small percentage of the towering godless and greatness of our Father. Magnificent sweetness and charm, chesed, kindness, love for all Jews and all Klal Yisrael. The last period of his life, my kesher to my father, my bond, was increased by the opportunity to be mishamish him, to help him, assist him in his last days. I said, I'm following in the footsteps of somebody that was a great tzaddik. We learn in the Torah that Esav used to honor his father and bring him food. And I said, I'm trying to be as good as that. Let my father, Yaakov Avi v'yochel mitzeit b'noi. Let my father get up and enjoy what I cooked for him. And you know, it was so hard for him because he couldn't eat many things. And to find the one thing that he would take into his mouth to nourish him, it was no small task. And for me to be able to, he was a great man and he gave us everything. To be able to return a small, tiny little portion of the chesed and the goodness, it was an honor and a gift to me. It was brought about by circumstance that Hashem willed, but it's very special. And then 2 years ago, my parents were in Israel. They made Aliyah, their live stream. They live in Netanya. How special it was for me to be able to go to be with my parents and to work together with my father on a daily basis in researching and writing and editing and preparing his book for publication. It was a very special time for me and a bond. And each of his children has had an opportunity to bond in a different way, each having their separate tchunot, separate personality traits and interests. My father found a way to reach each child and have a bond. How beautiful it was for me to be able, in the beautiful community of the Young Israel of North Netanya. It's a synagogue in Israel where it's all English and Americans. And the services are done, the speeches and everything is in English. And the people there love my father. And to sit next to my father at the age of 90 in the shul there, and to share with him a Rosh Hashanah and a Yom Kippur and a Sukkot was unbelievable. Almost the next year, that Rosh Hashanah was in my sister's house, as my niece spoke about so beautifully before. Thank you, Amanda. It was truly worth telling everybody about. The Aderes Eliyahu, the mantle of Eliyahu is so big, is so great. Seems almost impossible to carry it, to bring it forward. How my father loved not only his children and found a way to them, but each and every one of the grandchildren. Each and every one of them. Tali, and Ariel, and Daniel, and whatever they were doing. The big thing on the table now is, when is Daniel finding the shidduch? Every time my father was awake, did he have a date? Who's he seeing? The interest level in the middle of a terrible illness of what each child is doing. Amanda, Lauren, Joshi, like you said, his face would light up when you came into the room. The great-grandchildren, like was mentioned, my father was Zoche. Why does the Torah even mention that Yosef saw the great-grandchildren. That Yuldu al Birkov, they were raised on his knees. Obviously, there's something very special about that. To merit seeing a fourth generation. How special Bracha Esther and Joel. Chana Leah, named after my father's younger sisters who perished in the Shoah. And all of the grandchildren. And the daughters-in-law. They were all very special and wonderful. And meant a lot. And Yonah Moshe. And Jesse. Every one of you. Such love Zadie had for you. And I guarantee you, he's never going to forget you. He's going to be watching over you all through your lives. My father told me that when he was a little boy, a baby, that his mother, Ruda, who perished in the Shoah, Al Kiddush Hashem, and gave him his last bracha that carried him through life, as was so movingly described by my nephew. That she used to sing to him a lullaby. I said, what lullaby did she sing to you? And he said, it's the one, Rozhenkis mit Mandlin. It's a famous Yiddish song. And I used to sing it to him. I didn't know it. I actually had to study it and learn it so that I could sing it for my father. And every time I sang it for him when he was in his bed, not feeling well, he would sing together with me whatever koyach he had to teach me how to sing it more correctly. In dem Beis HaMikdash, in a Winkel Cheder, sitzt die Almone, bast Zion allein. Ihr ben Yachdel Yidelin, wiegt sie Keseder, und singt ihm zum Schlufen a Lieder schein. Unter jedeles Bigele steht a klar weiß Ziegele. Das Ziegele ist gefahren handeln. Das wird sein dein Beruf. Rozhenkis mit Mandlin. Shlov she'yidele shlov. Shlov she'tatele shlov. Rest in peace, my dear father. Be a Melitz Yosher for Klal Yisrael. We love you. Never forget you. From now into all eternity.
Kiva.
Yesterday, on the 26th of Teves, my father, Eliyahu ben Ruda Rivka, Eliyahu ben Yosef, was gathered to his people in the arms of Hashem. He was surrounded by all his children and my dear mother, non-stop. From the moment he arrived at St. Francis Hospital in Roslyn until his very last breath yesterday. During these 4 days at St. Francis, all of us, we all sang. We played his favorite Yiddish and Hebrew songs on the iPhone. We saw him smile. He enjoyed it. We davened with him. We said Shema with him.
told him we loved him. We held his hand as he really labored to breathe with a very, very severe pneumonia. In his final last mitzvah, we helped him put his tefillin on, and we laid his talis on him. One more time yesterday morning. He was very weak, but he nodded amen with every last bit of his energy. My father touched and inspired many, many people. And as you know, my dad loved to schmooze. He was a true chevraman in every sense of the word. He would make new friends wherever he met them. Every nurse, every doctor, every aide in the last few weeks that were helping us, they all made a deep, deep connection with him. We're getting letters now, how much they loved him. Even this past few days, just before we sent him to the hospital, he was so weak. Even then, my family was in Florida for a few days. The kids were in the pool. I FaceTimed with him. And he said to me, please, Kiva, don't let them catch cold. He just concerned of everyone, not himself. He loved the opportunity to share his experiences in the Shoah, as you all know. But not from sorrow or grief, but from love, from inspiration. He had a fight to live. And from the power of tefillah, the power of prayer, and a profound, unshakable faith that can shape a life. And it did his. From his days in the concentration camps to his days as an amazing and strong chazan and pulpit rabbi, spanning a career of some 40 years. And also in his retirement years, in the Carriage Club in Miami Beach, and in his condo at Siapra, Netanya, until his final days of life. He shared his heart with anyone who was open to it. And we, our family, we celebrated every last one of his heartbeats. I vividly remember how my father used to take me to Bradley Beach in New Jersey, where we grew up, in the summertime. And we would talk endlessly in the sand. He'd be working on his Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur sermons in the late summer on the beach. He had his notebook. That was what we did every single summer. My older brothers, for a few years, were studying in yeshiva in Israel. And there were many, many times it just seemed like I had them all to myself, sometimes with Becky, sometimes alone. And I will cherish each and every day. My dad loved to talk Israeli politics. He loved hearing his children sing at the Shabbos table. All of us, we all did that for them, both for he and my mom. He was a political pundit, very smart, very sharp, a powerful voice chazan. He was a skilled orator, a master sermon writer, a devoted husband to my mom. He was a devoted son-in-law to my mom's father, my Zaidi, Moshe Teitelbaum, who he joins now in Shemayim. He was a diehard Zionist, a doting Zaidi, but above all, he was my daddy. And my father's youth was filled with the Torah as a yeshiva student at the Yeshiva Ketana of Chachmei Lublin in Rachav, Poland, where he grew up. His adult life as a rabbi was dedicated to Kirov. So many success stories of people who are fully observant today. They didn't even know they were Jewish in many cases. I know of certain families that were celebrating Christmas, and today they're learning in yeshiva in Yerushalayim. This was my father's legacy.
In his last years, he worked tirelessly with my oldest brother, Yossi, to relive the painful memories in order to write and document his amazing memoir, On the Wings of Faith, which was published last year. Hashem had a plan for my dad to survive and create the Fishman family. And yesterday, he's reunited in Gan Eden with his little brother Yechiel, his sisters Chana and Leah, his father Yosef, and his mother Ruda Rivka. You know, being the oldest, he was in a local work camp when his family was taken. The whole town was marched to the trains. And somehow, he was able to catch a moment, as was mentioned earlier, through the fence with his beloved mother, Ruda Rivka, whose last words were to him, Eli, mein teure Kind. You will live. And you will carry on our family name. And he fulfilled that wish through his children, his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, who all follow in his Torah values. I borrowed these words, written almost 1,000 years ago, from the poem Akdamot we read on Shavuot, to describe the glory of Hashem. But I feel about this poem with my dad. Were the skies made of parchment, were every twig and a quill, and were the oceans filled with ink, and were every man a scribe, the story of our love for you, Daddy, would still remain untold. Daddy, on your arrival on the train from to Birkenau, in your first moments, the Nazis tattooed a number on your left arm, as was mentioned, B4159. Your emunah never wavered, not then and not ever after, as you wrapped that arm with tefillin every day until yesterday. And you wrapped both your arms around all of your children in a love that will leave us with a gaping hole in our hearts. Daddy, we will miss you forever, Dad. But we will continue to endeavor to make you proud of us in Shemayim. And Daddy, may your neshama soar every day higher and closer to Hashem. We will make you proud every day, Daddy, through us and our children, and on in the chain, unbroken chain that you taught us to live by. We love you, Daddy. And may your neshama be next to Hashem. Amen.
Becky.
You have heard about my father's incredible life journey, about his extraordinary accomplishments, his brilliant mind, his love of Israel, his powerful devotion to the God whose hand he believed saved him from certain death so many times that he told us about. When talking about a person filled with such spiritual greatness as my father. It is hard not to gloss over the man beneath, but he was both an extraordinary tzaddik, a righteous man, and a very special, very human man. As I thought about what I wanted to say, I knew I wanted to share a picture of the purity and beauty within the man my father was. My father was a man filled with love, and so he inspired love in everyone who knew him. He worshipped the ground my mother walked on. I'm going to try. Living on a rabbinical salary, he was sometimes a little stressed when Mommy came in the door with shopping bags. But the minute she put a dress or hat on, his eyes would light up, his face would break into a radiant smile, and he would pronounce her beautiful. Each of his 4 children were utterly adored, and he had a special bond with each that was unique to that child. Yossi and my father had an intellectual and rabbinical kinship. Yale and Daddy had their mutual love of learning and the stock market. Akiva and Daddy loved saying tefillah together. I watched Akiva daven with Daddy every day and put tefillin on him and his talis on him when he couldn't do it for himself. But I know my brothers won't be offended if I say that as his baby girl and the namesake of his beloved mother, I had a slightly outsized portion of my father's heart. In my father's eyes, I was perfect. Whenever he hugged me, even right after I had a baby, my father always said the same thing. Bein delach, bones is all there is. It wasn't the case. His face always reflected back such pride and adoration. It was mutual. We worshipped each other. We also loved being together. My father knew how to enjoy himself, especially at our winter trips to Grossinger's, where he did things totally out of character, like take me tobogganing and snowmobiling, or on vacations in Israel, or summers at the beach. He loved the beach and thought the ocean air could cure all ills. It was his most relaxed and joyful place. As soon as the sun shone, even if it was brisk out, my dad would lie on a beach chair in our driveway with a few buttons undone to heal his heart and imagine he was on the beach already. As he struggled to breathe into that mask in the end, I asked him to think about the ocean air, and I pray that he did. My daddy was simply adorable. You've heard about his predictable and super corny sense of humor and his silly rhymes. Yes, you could count on him to say if there was a matzo ball, a knadel for my madel, but everything was a rhyme, and I can't think of them all. He had these endearing idiosyncrasies that just made you love him more. He liked his soup very, very, very hot. And you better warm the plate first and spill the water back in, and then give him a really hot bowl of soup. He was very troubled by bare feet and could not relax until the acute danger was remedied with socks or slippers. The last thing he said to Yossi the Shabbos was, Yossi, your feet, your feet. He had his own name for things. A remote control was a clip, and a refrigerator was a dus. I'm not sure why, it just always was. When I was little, I didn't even know there was a name for suntan lotion other than Schmierox. Which context thankfully differentiated from cream cheese, which was also Schmierox. Dad was in charge of applying the Schmierox at the beach and reapplied what was the height of protection then, our childhood, copper tone number 4, with intense diligence. Daddy was not our day-to-day caretaker. That was our mom. But he was in complete charge of us when we were sick. He told us to drink hot tea, no matter what the ailment, sore throat, or sprained ankle. Combined with his unwavering adoration of us, our father's shtick made our world very safe. The thing about a terminal illness is that it heightens the intensity of your qualities. My brother spoke about my father's unique qualities, his mitos. He was all of those things. He was truly the definition of greatness. My father was above the type of cruelties that people might say in an argument. There was no pettiness within him. His greatness lay in his forgiveness, his concern for others. He never held a grudge when he was wronged. Perhaps because he knew what true evil was, what true suffering was. He was always a level above everyone else. The nurses and aides who cared for him remarked on his sweetness and the way, even amidst his worst suffering, he expressed appreciation and generously heaped praise on anyone who did anything for him. One lovely aide my father always praised as meticulous wrote to my mother that she felt she'd lost a father. Even in the greatest discomfort of his past few days, he constantly asked about the welfare of others. On Saturday night in the ER, he wanted everyone to stay away. The minute I walked in, he said, "There's infection here. Go out." He expressed concern about Amanda. And when I said that she was away, he said, "Well, what about Willie? Go home and take care of Willie." He was unable to eat or rest more than a few minutes at a time, but he was desperate to see everyone else well fed and rested. My father was the warmest person I've ever known. He was unabashedly, unashamedly emotional. Daddy wasn't much into sports, as you've heard, but he loved to watch movies, and so I snuggled up with him often. He loved World War II films and old dramas. I remember one night as a young teenager watching an old movie with him called Imitation of Life, where Lana Turner played this self-sacrificing mother who'd given up her son for his own benefit when he was a baby. As Lana was being grilled on the witness stand by her own son, who had no idea she was his mother because of her sacrifice, I began to cry, and when I looked over at my father, I saw that he was openly sobbing. I just thought that was a compassionate trait that we shared. It wasn't until later when I learned how his mother hid coins in his shoes so that he might have a chance at survival, and realizing the vulnerability of her younger children instructed him to live as a remembrance for their family, that I realized why a tearjerker about a mother's sacrifice would so overcome him. as my brothers and I have leaned on each other in the decline of our father's health, I thought a great deal about the suffering a teenager felt at the loss of his entire family. As he said, alone, he was alone in a world gone mad. And the fact that he was so intense about us, not only because we were named for his parents and siblings and evidence of fulfilling his mother's blessing, but also because we were his only family. Our daddy's devotion and caring is his most lasting legacy. When I was a teen, my mother's father came to live with us. My father treated him every day as if he were visiting royalty. Normally, my dad's instinctive reaction when walking by a room was to flick off the light. But he went against his frugal nature when it came to my grandfather, coming in to check if Zadie had enough light, turning on lamps. He couldn't do enough for him. With our daddy as our role model, I hope he felt he received it in the extreme devotion we felt toward him. But while I think we all treated him with such devotion and love, how can I take any comfort in the care that I gave my father in comparison to the selfless devotion of my brother Yossi, who cared for my father hour after hour, night after night? We've talked about that, but you need to understand what that meant. He ran when my father whistled, and he whistled constantly for Yossi. With total disregard for your own discomfort or lack of sleep. Yossi, we owe you a debt of gratitude for the absolute perfection with which you nurtured our father. No mother ever cared for her own child more tenderly than you cared for Daddy. And no one in my family will ever forget the sound of my father's voice calling for Yossi, often even while several of us were in the midst of helping him. You've heard a little about the last few days in the hospital. I can only say that we are all filled with tremendous and yet objectively ridiculous guilt about every decision we made in his last weeks and days, about whether we could have prolonged his life another minute if we had done something differently. But I know the burden fell heaviest on you, Yossi, as the oldest and the one he trusted with his care. That last night, when you massaged our father's feet for 3 hours straight without sitting down to relax his breathing, I believe he knew that if you could sustain him with your sheer force of will and extreme devotion alone, he would have lived forever. Daddy, my dad. You were so proud and adoring. Countless times you said to each of us, I love you, you're wonderful. How you beamed with pride over every one of your children and grandchildren's accomplishments. If you look in my father's wallet, you can see folded up pieces of paper with any award or honor that any of us had. Daddy. I ask you for mechila at any moment, or forgiveness, perhaps in my childhood or teenage years, where I didn't honor you as completely as I should have. I wish I had done more for you, but I know that all you really wanted was to see my face and to look at Lauren and Josh and Amanda and hear their voices and take pleasure in their sweetness when I brought them to you. I can't stop thinking about the last moments in the hospital when you were with us and you opened your eyes and you looked at Mommy with a huge smile on your face when they took the mask off. And you said to her, "You're beautiful. They're beautiful." Daddy, you were so beautiful to us, and we will miss you. I will miss you.
There's a lot of motion in this room today as we come here. The sons, the daughter, grandchildren, and our friends who've joined us to bid goodbye to our beloved father, our rock, our anchor. I want to thank everyone who's come here as a community, as friends. Your presence is special. I know some of you made long trips and took time out of your day, and it's the community and it's love, and we feel that embrace of love, and we thank everyone who came. Now, there's a speech here. About a half a year ago, those who were Zoche, some of you were, to be at the dinner at Adelphia honoring my father for founding the yeshiva 45 years ago, when my father spoke and my two brothers spoke, and it was my turn for the speech, I got up on the podium and I ripped it in half. And I got a standing ovation for saying nothing. That's truth, right, Rabbi Shane? So, and the reason I did that wasn't that I was afraid of getting in front of a microphone, as some of you know. But everything was said that should have been said. And the hour is late, and I want to hear a few words from Rabbi Hain. So I will speak in Israel, God willing. But I do not wish to diminish the honor I owe to my father, which debt I can never pay. I'm so grateful for the time we had, for every second, every moment. Our father was our rock. He was our anchor. He was our shield. He was our champion. His courage, which does bear recalling. When you're in Auschwitz, a prisoner with murder around you, one doesn't look for ways to risk one's life more than just being there. Yet being the postman smuggling letters to loved ones to give hope to others back and forth from the men's women's camp, or what was mentioned, the Hatzalah effort, bribing a German guard to bring a truck with food to the starving Hungarian women to be gassed, all offenses you're shot immediately, there's no question. He faced death. He took risks when he felt he had to do it. It was what he needed to do to keep his soul intact. And that was amazing. But no less amazing than his heroism of the way he lived. I just want to say this because obviously I have a lot to say, but I'm not going to right now. But his life isn't just measured by the last moments he breathed, the last days or weeks, but it does help us focus and understand, each of us, myself totally. Something aches, I have arthritis, this and that. We all have our feelings and our challenges and our pains and our suffering. And my father bore his pain, and I could see it on his face when he was in agony. And he never complained. He stoically said it. When he typically would be asked, how is he doing? And he was very ill. Fine, Baruch Hashem. Grudgingly, and later, stages, he would say, could be better. Could be better. But he never complained. And like my sister said, my brothers, even in the hospital, do you have a chair? He's dying. He's suffering. He's choking to death. Do you have a chair? Becky, go home to rest. His mind was always focused on others. As a child, I just remember this, and I'll close. Some people came to the house. He was a Rav, poor person. They wanted a handout. I invited him in. He told my mother, prepare some food. The man must be hungry. If he's coming for charity, he doesn't have what to eat. That's the way he thought, outwardly bound. His love for everyone, for Klal Yisrael, was there. His love for our mother, Eileen, was his anchor. His princess, Becky, Yossi, Akiva, myself, our children, the grandchildren. And it's true. And it's true what was mentioned. I think a night or two, I told Daddy, Daniel had a nice date, and he said, he had a nachas for everything. When Amanda came to visit a week ago and she walked in, his face lit up. He would look at his children, if they FaceTimed in or Skyped in. He had a nachas when Ariel called, when Daniel called, when Lauren, or whoever. He loved it. And I only pray his memory should be a inspiration, as Akiva said, for all of us to try to live up in some small measure to the great man, Rabbi Eliyahu, Rabbi Yosef Moshe, our beloved father, Yeh Zichro Baruch.
My children want to just say one or two things. Go ahead, Jesse.
I just want you to know, Zadie, I will always remember you, and I will for the rest of my life. I'll do mitzvahs in your honor. I love you forever, Zadie.
I'm very proud of you, Jesse and Jonah and Joel. One of Zadie's favorite things was to FaceTime with my daughter, Joel, Chana Leah. And one of the things he used to sing to him, many songs, but he loved it. In fact, just a few days ago, we FaceTime. I'm going to ask Joel just to sing one of the songs very quickly that Zadie so enjoyed. Just go into here. I'm so proud of you. Zadie loved Israel with all his heart and soul. And from here we take Zadie, we bring him to the land that he loved so much.
So the rabbi that I know that we're remembered so extraordinarily today, I think would definitely be telling me right now, Kipana Hayom, Mehalchon by Nila. The hour is late. The family needs to check in at the airport, and so I will reserve my thoughts for hopefully another occasion. I'll say 1 minute, because in a sense this is the perspective that only a non-family member can give. Rabbi Eli Fishman, the American rabbi, and probably, in my terms, one of the most successful American rabbis, the most unlikely of successful rabbis, coming from the world that is no more. And what made him successful, from my perspective, when you think about We'll say, I'll be a rabbi for another 30 seconds. To be someone who came from that dark world and to come to America, to be a rabbi in Newark, in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, in Freehold, New Jersey. Whatever he built, the most important accomplishment were all of the hearts that he touched, together with this extraordinary Rebbitzin. We're told that Moshe this week is asked to go, right, to talk to the people. And we know the reason why Moshe was reluctant. He knew what he was facing. And he discovered it. V'lo shamu el Moshe. And the people wouldn't listen to Moshe. Mikotze ruach u'me'avoda kasha. It was second half of the 20th century in America when people had to try to make a living. Their ruach was depleted, their spirit. But this rabbi took the words of the Torah he knew and loved. V'samtem al levavchem. He put the words on their hearts. The Kotzker Rebbe actually says, why does it al levavchem? Why isn't it bilevavchem? In their hearts. And I would say the reason is because he has a reason. But I would answer that question because it takes a special person to put it in the heart. It takes a Rabbi Eliyahu, Fishman, to put it in so many hearts of the Jewish people all over. I know about some of those nefashos, NCSY in New Jersey, homes that were built, people learning in Yerushalayim. This great American rabbi left a fantastic family legacy, but he left an extraordinary legacy in the hearts and the minds of so many neshamos that he touched. Tehei nishmaso tzrura b'tzror hachayim, as he now goes on his way to fulfill that fifth word, the fifth word of Geula, vehevesi. It'll be brought, the fifth kos, the kos shel Eliyahu, that you will now bring to that ultimate Geula in Yerushalayim Yireh Kodesh. So we're going to conclude with my dear partner, Chazan Joel Kaplan, saying the Kel Mole. We thank all of you for coming and staying, and to remind you that the Shiva will begin, Mirza Hashem, Sunday morning at 8 Muriel Avenue at the Fishman home. And that will be continuing till Wednesday morning. Davening will be Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m., Monday through Wednesday at 7:30 a.m., and Mincha and Ma'ariv will be at 5 p.m. I ask you to please rise.
Ne'lemol rachamim shoychene bamromim hametzeh min chonechoino ale kanefei ashechino b'malos kedoshim uteorim ki zohar horakiyam mazehirim esen nishimas Rav Eliyahu ben Yosef Moshe sheholach li'olamo ba'avur shenodvim tzidoko be'ar haskoras nishimoso began Eden tehei menuchoso Lochein barorachamim yastireu b'seiser kinofov li'oilomim v'yitzirol b'tzorachayim esenishmoso Adonai hu nachaloso v'yonuach al mishkavo b'shalom v'noemar amen.
We love him, Ace.
I'm only going to have one car following me. Somebody's, who's going to, who's wrong?
Sometimes she plays cool. Yeah, but then she always starts.